The fire crackled in the center of the Apache camp, shadows twisting across painted faces. Before the tribe, the chief rose to his feet, eyes fixed on the pale-skinned girl seated apart. His words cut through the silence like a blade. "I sold my entire village for 3 nights with you." The warriors stirred in disbelief, and the girl's heart pounded, because the price he had named was far greater than anyone imagined. The desert night was sharp with wind, carrying the scent of smoke and sage. A full moon hung over the Apache camp, casting silver light across the circle of warriors gathered around the fire. They spoke in hushed tones, the weight of an unthinkable decision pressing over them. At the center sat Chief Taza, a man hardened by battles and seasons, his braids streaked with gray, his eyes dark as obsidian. His face revealed nothing, but his silence carried more power than words. For days, whispers had spread through the camp that he had struck a bargain no one could comprehend. Across from him sat the girl, Eleanor. She was not born of their people, yet she had lived among them since childhood. Taken in when her family perished on the frontier, she wore their beads, spoke their tongue, and worked beside their women, yet her skin remained pale, her features foreign. To many, she was both one of them and forever apart. The fire cracked, sending sparks into the night sky. At last, the chief rose, his shadow long and commanding. His voice was low, but it carried to every ear. "I sold my entire village," he declared, "for 3 nights with her." Gasps rippled through the circle. Some warriors muttered in shock, others spat into the dust in outrage. To trade a village, their land, their homes, for a woman. Madness. Elena's eyes widened, her breath catching. She stared at him, confusion knotting her chest. "Chief, what are you saying?" Taza's gaze locked on her, steady, unblinking. "I gave everything to the enemy. Our earth, our water, our horses. 3 nights, with you." The weight of his words pressed on the camp like the desert heat. Was it a confession of love, or something darker? A test, a trick, a sacrifice meant for reasons yet unseen? Eleanor's heart raced. The people around her whispered furiously, their voices rising like the wind. Why would a leader betray all for her? What fate waited beyond this bargain? And in the silence that followed, the fire roared louder, as if demanding the answer itself. The silence that followed Taza's words felt heavier than stone. The fire popped and hissed, sending sparks skyward, but no one moved. Every warrior, every woman, every child stared at the chief, as though the earth itself had shifted beneath their feet. Eleanor sat frozen, her hands clenched in her lap. The words replayed in her mind, each one heavier than the last. "I sold my entire village for 3 nights with you." She wanted to believe she had misheard, that the chief's tongue had slipped, but his gaze on her was steady, unflinching, leaving no room for doubt. At last, an elder rose. His face was a map of wrinkles, his braids white with age, his voice quivering with rage. "You gave them our land, our horses, our water." He pointed a trembling finger. "For her, for a white girl who does not carry our blood." The murmurs of the crowd swelled into growls. Warriors pounded the butts of their spears into the earth. Women whispered curses. Children clung to their mothers' skirts. The entire circle seemed ready to erupt. Taza lifted his hand and the noise faltered. His voice cut through the air, calm but sharp as flint. "Yes, I gave them all. Because there are battles fought with rifles and knives, and there are battles fought with hearts and spirits. You cannot yet see which this is." The elder spat into the dirt. "You speak madness. No chief would give away the lifeblood of his people for the embrace of one woman." Taza's eyes narrowed. "You think this is lust. You think this is weakness." He turned his gaze back to Eleanor. "You have lived among us. You know more than most that strength is not always measured in war." Elena's chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to ask him what he truly meant, but her throat locked. Around her, the muttering of the tribe grew louder, sharper. She could feel the hatred, the resentment aimed at her like knives. A younger warrior suddenly leapt to his feet, fury etched across his face. "Chief or not, you have shamed us all. You would give the earth of our fathers to pale hands, then you are no chief of mine," he spat, drawing his knife. the blade catching the firelight. Gasps spread through the crowd. To challenge the chief openly was death or worse, but tonight, with the camp already shaken, even the unthinkable seemed possible. Taza did not reach for his weapon. He stood tall, calm, as though daring the warrior to strike. "Do you think steel will answer what words cannot?" The young man snarled, but before he could step forward, Nyolo, the commander of the warriors, intervened. He shoved the younger man back, his voice booming. "Sit down, fool! You think to test him now, when the enemy already circles us?" The younger warrior hesitated, his rage unchecked, but Nyolo's grip was iron. Reluctantly, he lowered his knife, though his eyes burned with rebellion. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. She rose suddenly, her voice cracking as she forced it out. "Stop this! I never asked for this bargain. I never wanted any of this." The crowd turned on her as one, voices rising in accusation. "She brings ruin. She bewitched him. A curse in pale skin." Elena's face flushed hot with shame. Her voice trembled. "If my presence destroys you, then let me go. Give me back to the settlers, to the soldiers. Don't burn your homes for me." The circle roared, half demanding her banishment, half demanding her blood. But Taza stepped between her and the tribe, his arms spread wide. His voice thundered, silencing the chaos. "She does not leave. She does not die. She is the fire that will decide our fate." Elena's breath caught. His words carried not desire, but something deeper, more dangerous. What fire? What fate? The elder's voice cut through the silence again, bitter and sharp. "Then you have doomed us all, Taza, and when the soldiers come to claim their prize, you will see the ashes of your wisdom." The tribe dispersed in turmoil, voices rising into the night. Some stormed away, others lingered, glaring at Elena as though her very breath poisoned the air. She stood trembling, staring at the chief who had thrown their world into chaos for her. "Why?" she whispered. Taza turned his gaze on her, steady, unyielding. "Because the desert does not give second chances, and neither do I." The fire had burned low, leaving only glowing embers, but the anger of the tribe still smoldered hotter than flame. Warriors muttered in tight circles, their eyes darting toward Elena, their voices sharp with contempt. Mothers pulled their children closer, whispering warnings about the pale-skinned girl who had bewitched their chief. Even the elders huddled together, their faces grim, speaking of betrayal in tones meant to carry. Elena sat alone on a worn buffalo hide near the edge of the circle. Her heart pounded with every glance cast her way. She had lived with these people since childhood, shared their food, sung their songs, worked under the same sun. And yet tonight, she felt like a stranger, unwanted, an enemy in the skin of family. She looked up when Taza approached. The firelight carved his face in hard lines, his expression unreadable. He lowered himself to the ground across from her, folding his arms. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Elena broke the silence, her voice trembling but sharp. "Why? Why would you say that? Why would you give them everything for me?" Taza's dark eyes studied her. "Because the world we knew is ending. The soldiers take our rivers, the settlers cut our forest, and every season we are pushed further into dust. If I fight them with steel, I lose 100 lives for every one I take. If I fight them with sacrifice, perhaps I save what remains." Elena's breath caught. "And that sacrifice is me." He didn't look away. "You are the peace they covet, the one they believe gives them power over us. By trading you, I give them what they want, and take from them what they cannot see." Her hands curled into fists. "Do you hear yourself? You make me sound like a horse, or a rifle, or a piece of land to barter. I am not yours to trade." Taza's gaze sharpened, his tone steady but fierce. "No, you are not, and that is why I chose you. Because in you, they will never find obedience. They will take what I gave, but they will never hold it." "They will never hold you." Elena stared, stunned by the weight of his words. Around them, the muttering grew louder. A group of young warriors stepped closer. One of them, Kola, barely older than Elena, spoke with venom. "We bleed for this land, Chief, and you give it away for her. If you cannot lead us, we will choose another who can." Gasps rippled through the camp. A challenge to the chief's authority, spoken aloud, could not be ignored. Taza rose slowly, towering over the young warrior. His voice dropped low, dangerous. "Do you challenge me, Kola?" Kola's jaw clenched. He lifted his spear, not in attack, but as a declaration. "If you shame us further, I will." The circle erupted in shouts. Some cried for Kola to step down. Others urged him to strike. The tribe teetered on the edge of open revolt. Elena rose too, her fear forgotten. She pushed herself between them, her voice sharp enough to slice through the noise. "Stop! You hate me! Then blame me, not him. I never asked for his bargain, but I will not watch you tear each other apart because of me." The camp fell silent. Warriors stared, astonished that she dared speak. Taza's eyes narrowed, but he didn't move her aside. Elena's chest heaved, her voice shaking. "I've lived with you since I was a child. I've worked your fields, sung your songs, buried my friends beside yours, and now you say I am worth nothing but ruin. Then tell me to my face." No one answered. The silence was worse than anger. At last, the elder from before stepped forward, leaning heavy on his cane. His voice cracked, bitter but weary. "You are not our enemy, girl, but you are the fire he has chosen to burn our home. And if his fire consumes us, it is you we will blame." Taza's hand gripped the hilt of his knife, but Elena turned and met his gaze before he could speak. Her voice was softer now, but laced with steel. "If you believe sacrificing me will save them, then tell me the truth, Taza. Is it for them or is it for you?" For the first time, the chief's mask slipped. His eyes flickered, a shadow of something deeper, longing, grief, something he could not hide in time. He turned away, his voice low. "At dawn you will know." He walked into the darkness, leaving Elena standing alone, the tribe's eyes burning holes through her back. Her chest ached with questions she couldn't answer, fear she couldn't silence. And as the night stretched on, one truth settled in her bones. The fight was no longer just about survival. It was about the secrets buried in Taza's heart, and the price he was willing to pay for them. The first light of dawn painted the desert in muted gold. Smoke still curled from the campfires, now reduced to embers, but no warmth lingered in the Apache camp. The people gathered in uneasy silence, eyes shifting between their chief and the pale-skinned girl who had become the center of every whispered curse. Elena stood at the edge of the circle, arms folded across her chest, her back straight, despite the weight pressing on her. She hadn't slept. Every rustle in the dark, every muttered word outside her lodge, reminded her she was no longer seen as one of them. She was the wedge driven between chief and tribe. When Chief Taza appeared, the crowd parted reluctantly. He walked with the calm of a man who had already chosen his path, his face as unreadable as stone. He stopped near the central fire pit, now cold, and looked over his people. "You are angry," he said, his voice low but carrying. "You feel betrayed. You believe I have traded your blood for hers. Today you will see why." The elder leaned on his cane, his voice shaking with fury. "We see nothing but ruin, Taza. You gave away the rivers of our fathers and the horses of our sons for a girl who does not even share our blood. What more proof do we need?" The crowd murmured their agreement, the sound like dry leaves in the wind. Taza lifted his hand, and silence followed. "You think I have surrendered. You think I have sold our people for nothing. But I have made a bargain the soldiers cannot understand. I gave them what they believed would break us. Yet what they took was nothing compared to what remains." Confusion rippled through the crowd. Kola, the young warrior who had challenged him, stepped forward, anger sharp in his voice. "You speak in riddles, Chief. If the bargain saves us, why hide the truth? If she is not the reason, then tell us what is." Elena's heart pounded. She wanted to hear it too, needed to. Taza's eyes turned to her, and for the first time, there was no mask. His voice dropped, quieter now, but every word struck like an arrow. "Because she is not just a girl. She is the daughter of two worlds, born of settlers, raised among us. The soldiers believe she binds us to them, but in truth, she binds them to us. Through her we hold their hunger at bay for now." Gasps rippled through the circle. Some warriors muttered agreement, others shook their heads. Eleanor's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to shout that she was no weapon, no pawn. But deep down, she understood. To the settlers, her survival meant leverage. To the Apache, her presence meant danger. To Taza, she was both shield and spark. Kola spat into the dust. "How you gamble with all our lives for a pale girl's shadow. If you are wrong, we are destroyed. If you are right, we are slaves to her fate." He raised his spear, voice trembling with conviction. "Then I challenge you, Chief. Step down or face me." The camp erupted in shouts. Some cried for the chief, others for Kola. Spears rattled against the earth. Women wailed. Children clutched their mothers. The tribe stood on the brink of tearing itself apart. Eleanor's chest tightened. She looked at Taza, waiting for him to reach for his blade. Instead, he stepped forward slowly, facing the young warrior. His voice was calm, almost sorrowful. "You think you fight for your people, Kola, but you fight only for pride. Still, if it is strength you want, I will give you a trial." The murmurs grew louder. A trial meant blood, but also truth. Taza raised his hands. "At sunset, I will face him. If I fall, my choice dies with me. If I stand, then you will know the path I walk is not weakness." The elder shook his head, muttering curses, but the people did not protest. The law of trial was older than any one man. Elena stepped forward suddenly, her voice breaking the air. "And what of me? Do I stand silent while you spill blood over a choice I never asked for?" All eyes turned to her. Her chest heaved, but she did not falter. "If I am the reason you fight, then let me choose. I will go to the soldiers myself. End this before more of you die for me." A roar of disagreement swept the crowd. Some shouted for her exile. Others demanded she stay. Taza silenced them with a single word. "No." His gaze locked on Elena. "You are not theirs to take, and you are not mine to give. At sunset, they will see this truth." The crowd slowly dispersed, torn and unsettled, whispers thick as smoke. Elena stood trembling, her mind a storm. Taza had bound her fate to his in front of everyone. If he fell in the trial, she would be blamed. If he won, she would be tied to his choice forever. And as the sun rose higher, one truth burned hotter than the desert itself. Whatever happened at sunset would change her life and the tribe's forever. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the village with relentless heat. The challenge had been spoken, and now every soul in the camp moved under its shadow. Men sharpened blades, women prepared herbs for wounds not yet made, and children whispered about the fight as if it were already legend. Elena walked through it all as though trapped in a dream. Wherever she went, eyes followed, some glared, others looked away, but none saw her, as they once had. She was no longer Elena who had learned their songs, who had carried water from the stream, who had buried her childhood friends in Apache soil. She was the stranger who had forced their chief to gamble everything. By midday, she found herself outside Taza's lodge. She hesitated, then pushed aside the flap. Inside, the chief sat cross-legged, a knife across his knees, his eyes closed in silent meditation. The air smelled of sage smoke. "You should not be here," he said, without opening his eyes. Elena's voice trembled, but she forced it steady. "You risk your life tonight. For me. For something I never asked for. Don't I deserve to understand why?" Taza opened his eyes slowly. They were dark, unreadable, but softer than she expected. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "When I was a boy, I watched soldiers ride into our valley. They burned our crops, cut down our trees, and left our people hungry. My father said strength was the only way to survive, so I became strong. I fought, I led, and still we lost. Piece by piece, the land slipped away." He paused, his fingers brushing the edge of the knife. "Then you came, pale-skinned, but not pale-hearted. You learned our tongue, carried our burdens, and lived as we lived. You became a bridge between worlds, whether you wished it or not. When I traded with the soldiers, I gave them what they wanted most, the illusion of control. But I knew, in truth, they had nothing, because you could never belong to them." Elena's chest tightened. "And if you lose tonight, what then? What becomes of me?" his gaze sharpened, fierce. "Then you must live, and remember that I chose you not as a prize, but as a reason." Her breath caught. For the first time, she saw not just a chief making cold bargains, but a man carrying the unbearable weight of his people's survival. Yet his words also carried something else, something unspoken but unmistakable. Desire. Not for her body alone, but for the hope she represented. The silence stretched until Elena broke it, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't want to be the reason for anyone's death, Taza. Not yours, not Kola's, not this tribe's." Taza's expression hardened again, the mask slipping back into place. "Some things cannot be chosen, Elena. They are given to us by the desert, and the desert does not ask permission." She turned away, her heart heavy, but his voice stopped her at the door. "At sunset, stand where you can see. Whatever happens, you must bear witness. It is the only way they will believe." The hours crawled. Warriors prepared the arena in the center of camp, marking a circle with stones. Kola practiced with his spear, his young body quick and eager, his friends whispering encouragement. The elders gathered herbs and bowls of water, murmuring prayers for balance. Children climbed onto rooftops to see better when the sun fell. Elena tried to help with the women, grinding herbs, fetching water, but their cold silence drove her away. By afternoon, she sat alone at the edge of the camp, staring at the mountains. Her thoughts tangled: fear for Taza, anger at being made a symbol, guilt for the tribe's suffering. And yet, beneath it all, something she could not deny, a flicker of hope that he might win, that his choice might mean more than sacrifice. As the sun began its slow descent, shadows stretched long. Drums sounded low and steady, calling the tribe together. The circle filled with bodies, every face turned toward the arena. Elena pushed through the crowd until she stood at the front, her hands trembling. Taza entered first, bare-chested, his braids tied back, his body painted with black streaks of war. He carried no blade, only his hands and the weight of his choice. Kola followed, young and fierce, his spear gleaming in the firelight. The drums ceased. Silence pressed heavy. The elder raised his cane. "The chief faces his challenger. If he falls, his path dies with him. If he stands, his word is law. Let the desert decide." The circle tightened, breaths held, eyes wide. Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest. She wanted to call out, to beg them to stop, but her voice locked in her throat. Taza and Kola stepped into the circle. The firelight caught their faces, one lined with age and burden, the other young and hungry for pride. And as the last rays of sun dipped behind the ridge, the trial began. The circle of stones glowed red in the firelight. Drums beat low, steady as a heartbeat, then fell silent. All that remained was the hiss of burning logs and the held breath of the tribe. Taza and Kola faced one another in the center. The young warrior's grip on his spear was tight, his knuckles white, his eyes fierce with the hunger of youth. Taza stood with empty hands, his posture calm but unyielding, his body scarred with the marks of battles long past. Elena's chest constricted. She pressed her hands together, whispering a prayer she wasn't sure to whom, for peace, for mercy, for anything but more blood. Kola lunged first, his spear thrust fast and sharp. Taza sidestepped with surprising speed, his hand snapping out to shove the shaft aside. The crowd gasped as the spear's tip grazed his ribs but drew no blood. Kola spun, driving forward again. This time Taza caught the spear just below the blade, twisting hard. The wood groaned. For a moment, the two men locked in a contest of strength, muscles straining, faces inches apart. "You're too old," Kola hissed through clenched teeth. Taza's voice was steady. "And you're too proud." With a sudden jerk, Taza wrenched the spear downward, slamming its butt into the dirt. Kola stumbled but didn't fall. He roared, tearing the weapon free, and struck again in a wide arc. The blade sliced Taza's shoulder, leaving a thin line of blood. The tribe cried out, voices rising. Some cheered the young warrior, others called for the chief. Elena's stomach twisted at the sight of blood. Her hand flew to her mouth, but she couldn't look away. Taza stepped back, his breathing steady despite the wound. He raised his hands, curling them into fists. "Come again!" he commanded. Kola charged, his spear thrust like lightning. This time, Taza moved in close, deflecting the strike with his forearm. He grabbed the shaft, twisted, and with a surge of strength, tore the weapon from Kola's hands. The spear clattered outside the circle. The crowd erupted in shouts, some in awe, some in fury. Weaponless, Kola bared his teeth and swung with his fists. He struck Taza's jaw once, twice, the sound cracking in the night. Taza staggered, then answered with a blow of his own, his fist smashing into the young man's cheek. Blood sprayed, and Kola reeled back, dazed but unbroken. Elena's heart pounded. She wanted to scream for them to stop, to remind them both this fight was over her, over something she never asked for. But her voice stuck in her throat. Kola lunged again, tackling Taza to the ground. They rolled in the dirt, fists flying, bodies colliding with brutal force. Dust rose, choking the air, the circle pressing tighter as the tribe shouted for blood. Taza straddled the younger warrior, his fists pounding down. Kola's face bled, but his hands clawed at the chief's arms, fighting with desperate fury. With a sudden surge, he reversed their positions, pinning Taza beneath him. His hand closed around a rock, jagged and sharp. Gasps tore through the crowd. Elena stepped forward without thinking, her voice piercing the night. "No!" Kola froze for the briefest instant, his eyes flicking toward her. It was all Taza needed. With a roar he twisted, wrenching free, and slammed his elbow into Kola's temple. The young man collapsed to the dirt, stunned. Silence gripped the camp. Dust settled, the fire crackled, and every eye fixed on the two men. Taza rose slowly, his chest heaving, blood streaking his skin. Kola groaned, struggling to rise but failing. Taza stood over him, his shadow long in the firelight. He reached down, not for a weapon, but for the young man's arm. With a single pull, he dragged Kola to his feet and shoved him upright. His voice thundered, "This is not weakness, this is restraint. I do not kill my own to prove my strength. If you doubt me still, then challenge me again tomorrow and the next day, and the day after that, until you see the truth." The crowd erupted, not in cheers, not in jeers, but in stunned murmurs. Some bowed their heads, others exchanged uneasy glances. Taza turned slowly, his gaze sweeping across the tribe, then locking on Elena. For an instant, his mask slipped, and she saw the truth in his eyes. He had fought not just for leadership, but for her. Her heart lurched. She couldn't tell if it was fear or something far more dangerous. The elder raised his cane, his voice heavy. "The trial is done. The chief stands. His word is law." The circle broke, people dispersing with voices low and uncertain. The fire sputtered, sparks rising into the night sky. Elena remained frozen at the edge, trembling. She knew the fight had ended, but nothing had truly been resolved. If anything, the battle had only begun, inside the tribe, and inside her own heart. The camp was restless long after the circle had broken. Voices carried in low, angry tones. Fires burned down to coals, but no one slept easily. Some muttered that the chief had humiliated the tribe by refusing to kill. Others whispered that his restraint was wisdom, proof of a leader who thought beyond blood. The division cut through every tent, every family. Elena lay awake on a woven mat in her small lodge, staring at the flicker of firelight leaking through the flap. The sounds of the camp pressed against her, arguments, weeping, the restless shifting of horses. She closed her eyes, but the images of the fight replayed. Taza's fists striking, Kola's face bloodied, the crowd's roar. And then that look he had given her, raw and unguarded, as if the entire duel had been for her alone. Her chest ached with confusion. Was she a burden or a bond, a curse or a reason? At last she rose, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, and slipped outside. The night was cold, the stars sharp above. She moved quietly through the camp until she reached the chief's lodge. A single torch burned outside, casting long shadows on the hide walls. She hesitated, then pushed the flap aside. Taza sat cross-legged inside, his chest bare, his wounds freshly bandaged. He looked up as she entered, his face calm but his eyes betraying fatigue. For a moment, neither spoke. "You should rest," Eleanor said softly, his lips curved faintly, though not in humor. A chief rests when his people do, and tonight none rest. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. They hate me, Taza. I hear it in their whispers. They blame me for every drop of blood. If you think this bargain will save them, you're wrong. They'll never accept me. Taza's gaze held hers, steady and dark. It is not about them accepting you. It is about them surviving long enough to have the chance. She shook her head. You risk everything. You trade land, water, horses, for me. Why? Is it really just politics, or is it something else? His silence stretched. At last he spoke, his tone lower, almost intimate. When the soldiers came for us last winter, they demanded more land. I gave them none. We fought, and we bled. Children starved that season. I swore I would not make the same mistake again. When they asked for you, I saw a way to buy time. Elena's voice cracked. And what of me? Did you ever think to ask what I wanted? Taza's jaw tightened. You would have said no, and I could not allow it. Sometimes a leader chooses what others cannot. Her hands trembled, anger and sorrow colliding. You speak as though I'm not a person, but a weapon, a shield to be bartered. And yet, she faltered, her throat tight. And yet, when you looked at me tonight, it wasn't politics I saw. The torchlight flickered across his face, revealing what words would not. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. You are right. It is not politics alone. The air between them grew heavy, charged with something dangerous. Elena's breath caught. She should have pulled away, but instead she stood rooted, her heart pounding. Outside, voices suddenly rose, an argument near the edge of camp. The spell broke. Taza stood, pulling on his cloak. The tribe tears itself apart. Some follow me, some do not. If they fracture, the soldiers will crush us all. He moved toward the flap, but Elena caught his arm. Taza, if you fall, what happens to me? He turned, his gaze fierce but soft beneath. If I fall, then you must live. That is all that matters. Her throat tightened. And if you stand? He held her eyes, his answer simple, final. Then you stand with me. Before she could respond, a cry rang out in the night. Warriors shouted, torches flared, and the camp erupted in chaos. Taza's hand went to his knife, his voice hard again. Stay here. He slipped outside, leaving Elena trembling in the silence of his lodge. She clutched her shawl tight, her heart pounding. Whatever had just passed between them was unfinished, dangerous, and now the camp itself seemed ready to break apart. The camp had turned into a storm. Shouts pierced the night, torches waved like wild fireflies, and warriors clashed not with enemies but with one another. The fragile thread holding the tribe together finally snapped. Elena burst from Taza's lodge, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. The sight froze her blood. On one side of the square, Kola and a cluster of young warriors shouted defiance, their voices hot with anger. He shames us. He gives away our land. He trades our blood for hers. Their spears rattled against the ground in unison, a rhythm of rebellion. On the other side, Nyolo, commander of the seasoned fighters, stood with Taza, his men forming a protective half-circle. You dishonor yourselves, Nyolo barked. The chief stood his trial. His word is law. The tribe divided before Elena's eyes, sons against fathers, brothers against brothers. Women pulled children back into lodges, fearful that blood would spill before dawn. Taza raised his hand, his voice booming over the chaos. Enough! But Kola pushed forward, his face still bruised from the duel, his eyes burning with fury. You call yourself chief, then prove it again. Not in a circle bound by stones, but here and now, before the whole tribe. Kill me, or admit you are unfit. His words struck like thunder. The younger men shouted their agreement, some stamping their feet, others brandishing blades. Elena's stomach twisted. She saw where this was heading. Another fight, another chance for death, and this time no restraint might save them. Before she could think, she stepped forward, her voice sharp and desperate. Stop this, don't you see what you're doing? You'll destroy yourselves before the soldiers even lift a rifle. Every head turned toward her. The torches painted her face in flickering orange, her pale skin glowing against the night. To some, she looked like a curse given flesh. To others, like a spirit trying to speak reason. Kola's voice dripped with venom. "There! Do you hear her? She dares to speak as though she commands us. She is the root of this shame. Cast her out, and we take back our honor." A roar of approval erupted from his side. "Banish her. Send her to the soldiers. Let her blood pay the price." Elena's heart hammered. The words cut deeper than knives because she could see the truth in some faces, faces she had once called family. They wanted her gone. Taza strode forward, planting himself between her and the mob. His knife flashed in the firelight as he raised it high. "The next man who takes one step toward her dies by my hand." The crowd fell into uneasy silence. Even Kola hesitated, his spear trembling in his grip. Taza's voice thundered, raw with fury. "She is not yours to cast out. She is not a curse. She is the bond that holds us. If you cannot see that, then you are blind to the desert itself." Elena swallowed hard, her throat tight. For all his power, for all his defiance, she could feel the weight pressing against him. He was one man against half a tribe, and sooner or later, the numbers would break him. The elder hobbled forward, leaning on his cane, his voice weary but cutting. "Taza, the people do not trust you. They see her as fire, burning our roots. If you keep her, you keep division. If you give her, perhaps you keep peace." Elena felt the ground tilt beneath her. She wanted to scream that she wasn't a bargaining chip, that she belonged to no one, but the words stuck. Her chest ached as if a stone had been laid upon it. Taza turned to the elder, his tone sharp. "Peace bought with betrayal is no peace. You think the soldiers will stop if they have her. They will want more. Always more." The crowd muttered again, voices split, tension vibrating in the air. Suddenly, Kola pointed his spear at Elena, his voice a battle cry. "Then let the desert decide. She should face trial too. If she survives, maybe she is meant to stay. If not, the spirits take her, and our honor returns." The words ignited the mob. "Trial! Trial!" they shouted, pounding spears and feet into the ground. Elena's blood ran cold. She looked at Taza, eyes wide with terror. "Trial? What do they mean?" His jaw tightened, his eyes grim. "They mean the desert will test you. A night alone, with nothing but what you carry. If the spirits return you at dawn, they will call you worthy. If not—" He didn't finish. Elena's knees weakened. "That's madness. I won't survive." But the tribe roared louder, the chant relentless. "Trial! Trial!" Taza's hand gripped her arm firmly, steadying her. His voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. "You can, and if you must face it, then I will watch the horizon until you return." Elena's heart pounded as the people closed in, their verdict clear. She was no longer just a girl caught in a bargain. She was a prisoner of their judgment. The night swallowed Elena before she could truly understand what was happening. One moment she was in the circle of firelight, surrounded by shouting voices. The next, she was being marched beyond the camp's edge, 2 warriors at her side, their spears glinting in the moonlight. The tribe's chant still rang in her ears. Trial, 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 a judgment as heavy as chains. Her arms were not bound, but the warrior's presence made clear she had no choice. They walked in silence, their faces carved from stone. When they reached a dry arroyo half a mile from camp, they stopped. One pointed at the ground. "Here," he said simply. The other handed her a small pouch, water, barely enough for a single night. A knife followed, its blade dull but sharp enough to cut. No food, no shelter, no fire. Elena's voice cracked as she spoke. "And if I don't return?" The first warrior's eyes were cold. "Then the desert speaks, and we obey." Without another word, they turned back, their silhouettes melting into the darkness. She stood alone, the stars endless above her, the silence pressing like a weight. Fear clawed at her chest. She clutched the knife tight, though it felt like little more than a twig against the vastness of the night. The desert stretched in every direction, shifting sand, jagged rocks, thorny brush. No path, no light, no sound but the wind. She wrapped the shawl tighter around her shoulders and forced herself to breathe. Survive until dawn. That is all. The hours dragged like years. She stumbled over rocks, her feet bleeding, her throat dry. Coyotes howled in the distance, their cries echoing through the emptiness. Every shadow seemed a predator, every gust of wind a whisper of death. At one point, she collapsed onto the sand, clutching the pouch of water. Her hands shook as she drank, careful to take only a sip. Her mind screamed to gulp it all down, but instinct told her that thirst was not the only danger. Cold seeped through the shawl, gnawing at her bones. She curled into herself, trembling, her lips moving in prayer. She prayed to the God of her parents, to the spirits of the Apache, to anything that might listen. Don't let me die here. Not like this. Memories flickered through the darkness. Her mother's laugh, her father's calloused hands, the faces of the Apache women who had raised her. And Taza, standing tall in the firelight, his eyes locked on hers as he said, "You are the bond that holds us." Tears burned her eyes. "Why me?" she whispered into the night. "Why must I always be between two worlds?" A sound broke the silence. Low, guttural. Her heart leapt into her throat. She rose, knife trembling in her hand. Out of the shadows emerged two glowing eyes, then another set and another. Coyotes, a pack, circling, their teeth flashing in the moonlight. Her breath came fast, her body rigid with terror. She waved the knife, shouting, "Go, leave me!" But the animals pressed closer, their growls rising. One lunged. She slashed wildly, the blade grazing its flank. The coyote yelped, retreating, but the others prowled tighter. Her back hit a boulder, her shawl snagging on its edge. Nowhere left to run. She screamed, thrusting the knife again and again, desperate to keep them back. Her arms ached, her voice cracked, but the pack did not break. Then, just as they closed in, a new sound split the air. A sharp whistle, shrill and commanding. The coyotes froze, ears twitching. Another whistle followed, and they scattered, melting into the darkness. Eleanor gasped, chest heaving, her knife still raised. She turned toward the sound and saw a figure on the ridge, a silhouette against the stars. Tall, broad-shouldered, cloak whipping in the wind. Her heart slammed in her chest. "Taza," she whispered, though she knew the chief had sworn not to intervene. The figure didn't move closer, didn't speak. He only raised a hand, palm open, and then disappeared into the shadows. Elena stood trembling, her knife dropping to the sand. She wasn't sure if it had been real or a vision conjured by fear, but her heart steadied, just enough to push her through the rest of the night. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, she staggered back toward camp, her body weak, her lips cracked, her hands raw. The people gathered as she entered, murmurs rippling like waves. She had survived, but Taza was not among them. Elena's knees weakened, her mind spinning with questions. Did he watch her trial? Did he save her without letting anyone know? Or had the desert itself spared her? The crowd parted, faces mixed with awe and suspicion. The elder raised his cane, his voice sharp. The spirits returned her. The trial speaks. Yet the whispers persisted, some calling her chosen, others calling her cursed. And in the silence of her own heart, Elena realized the trial had changed nothing. If anything, it had only deepened the divide. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when Elena stumbled back into camp. Dust clung to her skin, her lips cracked, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. She wavered on her feet but refused to collapse. The murmurs of the tribe rose around her, a sea of whispers and suspicion. She survived. The desert spared her. No, he spared her. The words stabbed like knives. Elena felt their weight pressing on her shoulders, heavier than the long night had. She kept her gaze forward, refusing to meet the glares, until she stood once more in the center of the circle where judgment always seemed to fall. The elder stepped forward, leaning on his cane, his voice sharp and brittle. "You walked into the desert, pale child, and you returned. The spirits could have taken you, but they did not. The trial speaks." The crowd rumbled in disagreement. Kola, his face still swollen from the duel with Taza, spat into the dust. No spirit spared her. The coyotes circle our land every night, and yet she comes back without a scratch. Do you not see? He followed her. He protected her. He broke the trial. All eyes turned to Taza, who had emerged silently from his lodge. His posture was tall, unbending, his expression as unreadable as stone. He said nothing, and the silence screamed louder than any denial. Elena's chest tightened. She remembered the figure on the ridge, the raised hand in the moonlight. Had it been him? Or only her mind, twisted by fear and exhaustion? Kola's voice rose, furious. This is not justice. This is deceit. He gives our land to the soldiers. He shields her from the trial, and he dares call it strength. He has lost the right to lead. The crowd surged, shouts of agreement clashing with cries of protest. Some demanded Taza's removal, others called him wise. The camp teetered on the edge of revolt again. Elena's heart pounded. She stepped forward, her voice breaking but strong enough to cut through the noise. Stop this. If you believe I cheated the trial, then punish me, not him. I walked the desert alone. I faced the night, the cold, the hunger. I came back because I refused to die. If you cannot believe that, then you blind yourselves. The people hesitated, mutters softening for a moment, but suspicion lingered. Taza raised his hand, his voice commanding, Enough. Whether you believe or not, the trial is done. She stands. That is the truth. The elder's eyes narrowed. And if the truth divides us, what then? Taza. For the first time, the chief's mask cracked. His voice carried iron, but also weariness. Then I will bear the weight. Not her. Elena turned, shock cutting through her. She could hear the unspoken words in his tone. He had followed her. He had spared her. Her heart raced, fury colliding with confusion. When the crowd began to disperse, she stormed after him, pushing into his lodge without waiting. Taza sat near the fire pit, stripping the old bandage from his shoulder. He didn't look up as she entered. You should rest. Her voice trembled with anger. It was you. Last night I saw you on the ridge. He didn't answer, only reached for clean cloth. Her hands shook. Do you know what you've done? You've made everything worse. They think I'm cursed, or protected, or both. They'll never trust me now. His gaze finally lifted, dark and steady. They will never trust you no matter what you do. You are the bridge they cannot cross. Her throat tightened. Then why? Why risk everything to save me? Taza's jaw clenched. Because the desert has taken too much from me already. I will not let it take you. Elena's breath caught, her anger faltering against the force of his words, but she couldn't let it go. And what of your people? They bleed, they starve, and you gamble their future on me. Do you love them less than me? The question hung heavy. For a long time, Taza said nothing. Then quietly, I love them enough to give them what they need, even if they hate me for it. And he paused, the words thick on his tongue, and I love you enough to give them everything else. Eleanor staggered back as if struck. The firelight danced between them, throwing his face into shadow. She had wanted answers, but the truth left her trembling. Her voice cracked. Then you've doomed us both. She fled the lodge before he could answer, her mind a storm. Outside, the camp still buzzed with unrest, divided and broken. And somewhere on the horizon, the soldiers who had demanded her in the first place were surely waiting, their patience thinning. The desert had not spoken its final word. By the second evening after Elena's trial, the desert carried new sounds, hoofbeats sharper than Apache horses, accompanied by the clatter of metal. The tribe heard them before they saw anything, and tension gripped the camp like a vice. Mothers pulled children close, warriors checked their rifles and bows, and elders whispered prayers. The soldiers were coming. Elena stood near the edge of the camp, her stomach twisted into knots. She remembered the bargain, the one Taza had declared before everyone. I sold my entire village for 3 nights with you. The words still burned in her ears, but now their consequence marched toward them in flesh and steel. Taza emerged from his lodge, tall and unbending, though exhaustion lined his face. His warriors gathered around him, waiting for command. The camp's voices swirled with anger and fear. Kola shouted loud enough for all to hear. "They come for her. Give her to them, and they will leave us in peace." "That is what you promised, Chief." The people murmured their agreement, some nodding, others demanding it outright. Elena's blood ran cold. She wanted to scream that she wasn't theirs to trade, that no promise could own her. But her throat locked as dozens of eyes turned on her, heavy with resentment. Taza lifted his hand, silencing the noise. His voice was firm, carrying to the farthest edge of the camp. "I promised them a shadow, not our soul. They come believing they own us. Today, they will see they do not." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The elder stepped forward, his cane trembling in his grasp. "You would defy them now. After giving them your word, you bring their guns upon us all." Taza's gaze hardened. "Better to face their guns than to live as their slaves." The division cracked wide open. Half the tribe cheered, raising their weapons in defiance. The other half shouted curses, calling him reckless, demanding Elena be handed over. Elena's heart hammered. She pushed through the crowd, standing beside Taza, her voice shaking but loud enough to cut through. "I will not be given, not to them, not to anyone. If you want me gone, then I will go on my own terms, but I will not be traded like a horse." The murmurs swelled again, some nodding at her defiance, others spitting in the dirt. Then, on the horizon, the soldiers appeared, rows of horses, uniforms catching the last light of day, rifles gleaming. At their head rode an officer, his moustache bristling, his eyes sharp as bayonets. The soldiers halted a short distance away, the dust of their march still settling. The officer raised his voice. "Chief Taza, we come to collect what you promised." His eyes swept the camp until they found Elena. His lip curled into a smirk. The girl. A hush fell over the camp. Dozens of Apache eyes turned from the officer to their chief. This was the moment. Would Taza honor his bargain, or defy it and risk war? Taza stepped forward, his shadow long against the sand. His voice carried like thunder. "I promised you ashes, and you came for fire, but the fire is not yours to hold." The officer's smirk vanished. He straightened in his saddle, his hand brushing the butt of his pistol. "Careful, Chief. You gave your word. Break it, and my men will burn this camp to the ground." Kola shouted from behind, his voice desperate. "Do it, Taza. Give her." "Spare us all," the tribe roared, half demanding surrender, half rallying behind their chief. Chaos swelled. Elena's breath caught as she stepped closer to Taza, whispering fiercely, "If you defy them, they will kill you. Kill all of us." His eyes met hers, dark and unwavering. "Then better to die free than to live broken." The officer barked, "Bring the girl forward, now." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The tribe teetered, split between fear and defiance. The soldiers raised their rifles, metal glinting in the fading sun. Taza raised his arm high. His warriors lifted their weapons in unison, bows drawn, rifles cocked, spears poised. The square froze, two worlds locked in a breathless standoff. One spark away from blood. Eleanor's knees trembled. She knew whatever happened next would decide not just her fate, but the future of everyone here. The desert held its breath. On one side, soldiers sat rigid in their saddles, rifles gleaming, fingers hovering over triggers. On the other, Apache warriors crouched low, bows drawn, knives flashing in the firelight. Between them stood Elena, her heart pounding so hard it hurt, caught like prey in a trap sprung on both sides. The officer's voice cracked the silence. "One last chance, Chief. Hand over the girl, or we spill every drop of blood in this camp." Kola shouted, his voice raw with fear. "Do it, Taza! Save us!" Others echoed him, desperation breaking into the night, but half the tribe shouted back in defiance, ready to fight. The camp teetered on the knife's edge of war. Taza stepped forward, tall and unyielding. "You think we will kneel because you wear metal on your chest. You think a promise made under threat binds me. No, you will leave with nothing." The officer's face hardened. He raised his hand, a signal, rifles lifted as one. Elena's breath caught. She saw it all unfolding, the first volley, the screams, the fire, and she knew that no matter who stood at the end, She would be the reason for the ruin. Before the officer could drop his hand, she stepped into the open, raising her arms. "Wait!" Both sides froze, startled by the sudden cry. Eleanor's voice rang louder than she thought possible, trembling but fierce. "You came for me. Then look at me. Do you see chains? Do you see obedience? You think owning me means owning them. You are wrong." The soldiers shifted uneasily. The officer frowned, his pistol still raised. "Girl, step forward." Elena shook her head, fire burning through her fear. "If you want me, you take me over their bodies. And if you kill them, you kill me too. I will not go with you alive." Gasps rippled through the Apache crowd. Even Taza's mask cracked, shock flickering across his face. The officer sneered. "Empty words." He jerked his reins and spurring his horse a step forward. But Elena didn't move. She pulled the dull knife from her belt, pressing the blade to her own skin. Her voice shook, but her eyes burned with resolve. "Try me." For the first time, hesitation rippled through the soldiers. Their target, the prize they had come to claim, stood ready to destroy herself rather than be taken. Taza seized the moment. His voice roared over the camp. "Do you see? She is not yours to command. She is not mine to give. She belongs to no one. And if you try to own her, you own only death." The Apache warriors shouted in unison, their weapons raised high. The sound thundered across the desert, fierce and defiant. The officer's hand wavered. His men glanced at one another, doubt creeping into their ranks. This was not the simple raid they expected. This was a fight that could cost them all. Kola's voice rang out again, desperate. "Chief, they'll kill us all." But the elder stepped forward, surprising everyone. His cane shook, but his voice carried clear. "No, the girl is right. If she is willing to die before being taken, then she carries the spirit of this land as much as we do. To give her is to give ourselves." Murmurs swept through the tribe. Louder now, agreement building. The tide was shifting. The officer snarled, fury twisting his face. "Enough! Take her!" He swung his pistol forward, but before he could fire, a single shot cracked from the camp. Boone, silent until now, stood at the far edge with his rifle smoking. The officer's hat flew from his head, the bullet grazing his skull. He reeled, cursing, clutching the wound. Chaos erupted. Soldiers raised rifles, Apache warriors loosed arrows. The night exploded with fire and screams. Elena dropped to the dirt as shots whizzed over her head. Taza grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a wagon. "Stay down!" he barked, his knife flashing as he met a charging soldier head-on. Smoke filled the air, horses screamed, the camp turned into a battlefield. Elena crawled to cover, her heart hammering, but her eyes burned with fury. She would not be helpless. She seized a fallen bow, clumsy in her hands, but steady enough to notch an arrow. With shaking arms, she aimed not at men, but at the oil lantern dangling near the soldier's supply cart. She loosed it. The arrow struck true. Flames roared to life, devouring canvas and gunpowder. A blast split the night, sending soldiers reeling, their formation shattered. Apache war cries rose like thunder. The tide turned. Through the smoke, Elena saw the officer stumble to his horse, blood streaking his face, his eyes locked on her, burning with hatred. "This isn't over," he roared, spurring his men to retreat. As quickly as it began, the battlefield emptied, soldiers fleeing into the desert, leaving behind fire and silence. Elena collapsed to her knees, trembling, the bow slipping from her hands. Taza stood over her, his chest heaving, his body streaked with blood. He looked at her as though seeing her for the first time. "You saved us," he said quietly. Elena met his gaze, her voice raw. "No. We saved each other." The camp smoldered in the aftermath of battle. Smoke curled from burned wagons, mingling with the copper scent of blood. The cries of the wounded rose into the desert night, raw and weary. The soldiers had retreated, but their shadow lingered, heavy and certain. They would come again. Elena stood amid the wreckage, her clothes streaked with dust and soot, her hands trembling. Around her, Apache warriors moved silently, tending to the wounded, carrying their dead. None spoke to her, but none looked at her as they had before either. Suspicion had not vanished, yet something in their eyes had shifted. Grudging respect, or perhaps fear. At the center of the camp, Taza stood tall, though blood seeped through the gash on his arm. He barked orders, his voice firm, refusing to show weakness. But when his gaze found Elena, it softened, just for a moment. The elder hobbled forward, leaning on his cane, his face a map of exhaustion and sorrow. His voice cracked as he spoke to the tribe. "We live another night. But at what cost? Our homes burn, our children weep, and our enemies circle closer, all because of her." He pointed his cane at Elena. "This pale girl is the flame that consumes us." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, sharper this time, closer to anger than gratitude. Elena's chest tightened. She stepped forward, her voice unsteady but loud. "If I am the flame, then let me burn for something more than your hate. I fought beside you tonight. I bled the same dust, breathed the same smoke. If I was meant to destroy you, then why am I still here? Why did I not fall when the desert tested me?" Her words silenced some, but not all, like Kola. His face twisted with bitterness, shouted, "Because he saved you, because the chief loves you more than he loves us." Gasps erupted. The accusation hung in the air like a blade. All eyes turned to Taza. He did not flinch. His voice was low, but it carried, "Yes, I love her." The camp erupted, cries of outrage, disbelief, confusion. Warriors shouted over one another, women wailed. The elder struck his cane against the earth in fury. Elena's breath caught. The words she had suspected, feared, longed for, spoken aloud before all. Her heart pounded, her mind reeling. Taza raised his hand, his voice rising above the chaos. "You think this love makes me weak? You are wrong. It makes me see more clearly than ever. The soldiers will not stop. They will take our land, our water, our lives. But through her we hold something they cannot break, choice. She is not a curse. She is a shield and a spark." The elder spat into the dust. "And what of us when their guns return? Will your love stop bullets? Will it feed our children?" Taza's eyes burned. "No, but our unity will, and if we cannot find it, then we are already dead." Elena stepped beside him, trembling but resolute. "If you hate me, then hate me. But know this, I will not run. I will not leave you to face them alone. If they come again, they will face me too." The crowd fell into uneasy silence. For the first time, she saw doubt in even Kola's eyes, not certainty, not acceptance, but the faint flicker of something that might one day become it. The elder turned away, shaking his head. "The desert has spoken. We will see if it was truth or folly." Slowly, the tribe dispersed, each to their own grief and wounds. The fire burned low, the night pressing heavy. Elena turned to Taza, her voice breaking. "You shouldn't have said that. Now they'll never trust you." He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "They would never trust me without it. At least now, they know I will not lie." Her throat tightened. "And if your love destroys everything—" His hand brushed hers, calloused and warm. "Then let it. Better to be destroyed by truth than to survive in lies." Tears stung her eyes, but she didn't pull away. For the first time, she felt not like a pawn between two worlds, but like someone standing on her own ground, even if that ground was made of fire. Above them, the desert stars burned cold and merciless. The soldiers would return, the tribe might fracture again, and tomorrow's battles loomed unseen. But in that moment, in the smoke and silence of survival, Elena and Taza stood together, bound not by bargains, but by something stronger. The desert was quiet again, but the silence carried weight. The fires had been rebuilt, the wounded tended, and the bodies buried in shallow graves beyond the ridge. Yet peace was fragile, like glass on the edge of breaking. Elena walked through the camp at dawn, the sky painted soft pink and gold. Faces turned toward her, some with suspicion, others with a strange, reluctant respect. She had stood through the trial of the desert, through the battle against the soldiers, and through the confession that had shaken the tribe to its core. But her place among them was still uncertain. Children followed her at a distance, whispering behind their hands, Women watched with guarded eyes. Warriors nodded curtly, acknowledging her survival but withholding acceptance. She was neither exile nor fully kin, caught as always between two worlds. At the edge of camp, she found Taza overlooking the valley. His figure was carved against the sunrise, tall and unyielding, though the burdens of leadership hung heavy on his shoulders. He did not turn as she approached. "They will never see me as one of them," she said softly. His voice was steady, almost solemn. "Perhaps not, but they will see you as part of me. And that is enough." She hesitated, her throat tight. "And if your love costs you the tribe?" He finally turned, his eyes dark but calm. "Then I lose them honestly. A chief who hides his truth cannot lead forever. Better they follow a man they distrust than a shadow they think they know." Eleanor looked out over the valley, the endless sweep of sand and sky. "The soldiers will come again. You know that?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "And when they do, we will stand. Not because we are stronger, but because we refuse to kneel." The wind stirred, lifting strands of her hair. For the first time, she didn't feel like a burden or a curse. She felt like a choice, one that Taza had made, knowing the cost. She turned to him, her voice softer now. "Then I will stand too." His hand brushed hers, brief but certain. No words followed, because none were needed. Behind them, the camp slowly woke. Children's laughter carried faintly, fragile yet defiant. Women stoked the fires, men saddled horses. Life pressed on, even under the shadow of tomorrow's war. Elena breathed deep, tasting the sharpness of the desert air. She knew her journey was far from over. The soldiers would not forget. Kola's resentment had not died. The tribe's unity was still fractured. Yet, for now, she had survived. For now, she had chosen to stay. As the sun climbed higher, its light burning away the night, Elena whispered to herself, almost as a vow, not as theirs, not as his, but as mine. The desert, vast and merciless, gave no answer. But in its silence, there was room for hope. Stories like this remind us how fragile survival can be when torn between loyalty, sacrifice, and love. Elena's journey is one of fire and defiance, proof that even in the harshest deserts, the heart can change everything. If this tale moved you, make sure to subscribe and join us for more stories of courage, betrayal, and impossible choices. And when you're ready, watch our next video. We'll take you deeper into another powerful story where the line between love and survival blurs in unforgettable ways.